Hello, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, I'm sure you've seen them, memes that straddle the line between humour and stereotypes. But at what point do popular memes become racist? We look at the trend of meme-ifying African-American interviewees. Our digital producer Malika Bilal is here looking out for all of your live feedback. Malika, I didn't think that something as simple as a meme could have so much depth for a discussion. What are you seeing so far?
So many layers, Femi. And now we're talking about instances and events that happen in the US, but of course that hasn't limited the conversation from being a global discussion, and we're hearing from people all over the US, but also all over the world, including Turkey and the UK. And Lois Nam on Twitter sums it up, puts it in perspective. She says, people of nearly every race and class have been poked fun at and meme-ified. Many find them all funny. Well, some of our community members disagreed with Lois, and we want to hear from all of you. So join our live conversation by using the hashtag AJStream.
Now with us in the studio is Jamila King, and Jamila is a reporter and a news editor at colorlines.com. Jamila, welcome to the stream.
Thanks for having me.
We're looking forward to hearing from you. Now, this is a show it's your show. Our community is the engine of this program, and we love hearing your program ideas. So if there's a story that you think is perfect for the stream, get in touch with us directly. Go to our About page at stream.aljazeera.com/about. I'm actually on it right now. Scroll down, you can find all of our Twitter handles. Here's mine, Lisa Fletcher's, Malika Bilal's, our producer Alce, he's down here. It's so easy to get in touch with us. Tell us your idea, and you could inspire one of our future episodes.
My name is Layla Shakely. I'm a student at MIT. I'm working for UN Habitat right now, and the founder of Crowd SOS, and I'm in the stream.
Charles Ramsey, you may have heard the name mentioned a few times on US News this past week. He's the man who helped rescue 3 women held captive in Cleveland, Ohio for nearly a decade.
I come outside, I see this girl going nuts trying to get out of her house. So I go on the porch. I go on the porch, and she says, "Help me get out. I've been in here a long time." So I figured it's a domestic violence dispute. So I open the door, and we can't get in that way because how the door is, it's so much that the body can't fit through, only your hand. So we kick the bottom, and she comes out with the little girl, and she says, "Call 911. My name is Amanda Berry."
Now, in the eyes of many, Ramsey's actions were heroic, and very quickly his candid descriptions of how he helped save the women inspired memes across the web, turning Ramsey into an internet sensation. Take a look at this video, which has aired over 12 million views since May the 7th.
Afternoon.
I knew something was wrong when a little pretty white girl ran into a black man's arms. Dad gave away. Dad gave away. My neighbor got big testicles cause we see this dude every day. We eat ribs with this dude, but we didn't have a clue that that girl was in that house. She said, "Please help me get out." Dad give away. Dad give away.
Okay, I'm laughing. I'm sure you are laughing as well. But Ramsey is not the first African-American interviewed by local TV and then meme-ified after being involved in a serious story. There was also Sweet Brown, who spoke about her near-death experience, barely escaping a fire in her apartment complex. And do you remember Antoine Dodson? He was chased away a home intruder who had come through the window and was attempting to rape his sister. They were all turned into viral videos, attracting millions of YouTube views. And while many enjoy the catchy auto-tuned soundbites, others warn that laughter directed at Ramsey or Brown or Dodson plays into the stereotyping of African Americans. So today we ask, are these viral memes lighthearted snapshots of popular culture or racist caricatures of African Americans? To help us answer these questions, we are also joined via Skype by Jimmy Israel, writer and journalist from Cleveland. In our Google Plus Hangout, Ernest Owens, a Huffington Post blogger, Arisayan Vinay, an activist and poet from Cleveland, and Cole Stryker, author and media strategist. Welcome to you all. We have a very brainy, smart team here. Let's start off with Jamila. There is a bigger story here, isn't there? It's not just about a funny dude making the news.
Right. So at its core, this is a story about violence against women. These 3 women were held captive in this house in Cleveland for a decade, where they had withstood rape, beatings, just pretty much the most horrific stuff that you can imagine happened to these women. And so this story, I think at its core, is about so many things, but it's about violence against women, it's about poverty, and it's about what it means to be Black and American, I think, in a lot of ways.
So then, Jimmy, why am I laughing every time I see that auto-tune of Charles Ramsey? Am I being racist? Is it racist?
No, but I'm laughing because I think her take is particularly interesting. I'm not sure if the case of Amanda Berry and the two other young ladies that were taken has anything to do necessarily with being Black and American, and I'm not sure if the memification of Charles Ramsey has anything to do with being Black and American. What I am certain of is that it can seem sometimes that the trauma of Black Americans on the local news somehow becomes fodder for comedy. And I think that Black Americans have trained white Americans to believe that every time Black people step in front of a microphone, we are there to entertain or edify them in some way. Or, so it's come to pass that no matter what you say, whenever you step in front of a microphone, whether your sister's been raped, whether you're saving 3 young ladies who have been raped, or whether your apartment is burnt to the ground, white people stand ready with a bag of popcorn to somehow make light of your trauma or to find some comedy in your misery. So that's a problem. And there are far too, and Charles Ramsey isn't the problem. The problem is that the media finds and commodifies these Charles Ramsey stereotypes. There are too many Charles Ramseys. Charles Ramsey gets too many media impressions versus the Lester Spencers and Cornell Belchers of the world. So that's really the problem.
Well, strong words there from Jimmy Aris.
Strong guy. What do you want from me?
We love it, and I want your thoughts, Aris, because you're also from Cleveland. But before you let us know, I want you to have a listen to this Facebook comment we got from Charles. He says, "Racist ? Caricature. Why are you making something out of nothing?" And that's followed up by Catherine, who says, "If you watch these sensational viral videos and you feel guilty because you associate them with the entire Black race, then the only person that has a problem is you. You're turning something of innocent jest into crude mockery." Aris,
wait a second. Hold on a second. Why does it always seem like the memes that catch on are of Black people? Now, for sure, there are white people on YouTube that have been featured in the 6 o'clock news who also become meme-ified. But those don't catch on as well as, hide your kids, hide your wives, and dead giveaway. And we ain't nobody got time for that. Those don't catch on as well.
Jimmy, I think that's an interesting point, and we're actually going to get to it a little bit later. But I do want to hear from Aris, because I know you're from Cleveland. You've got thoughts. What do you think about all this?
When I wrote the open letter to Charles Ramsey, I got a lot of pushback in that way. I got called racist, and I'm just like, how can I be racist? I can't be racist to myself. But in that same vein, it's just a whole lot of systemic racism that nobody really wants to unpack, because if you unpack those things, you have to challenge the very foundation this country was built on. And since we're not prepared to do that, it's easier just to say, why are you taking it so seriously?
So, Aris, tell us about your open letter, because not everybody's going to be aware of what that is.
I wrote an open letter the day after it happened, and it kind of went viral. And some of the things that I mentioned in the letter was just talking about how this situation with Charles and Angel, which was the other man who was at the site and helped bring those women out of the house, they could have easily, as men of color, avoided the situation altogether, because we know in this country, when you go to run to the aid of a white woman, it does not always turn out the way that you intend your heroism to turn out as. So,
really? We know that? How do we know that? Can you prove that empirically?
Well, the story that I paid reference to was the story of George Steiny, who was the 14-year-old, the youngest person ever executed in America. And the story was that 2 white girls were riding their bikes. George Steiny was the last one to see them alive. Those 2 girls were found murdered. And a search party went out to look for them. George Steiny even participated in that search and told them during the investigation that he saw those girls alive. And he was one of the last people that could account to it. And because of that,
what year did that occur?
That occurred back in the 40s.
Okay, so that was back when black men couldn't even pee in the same place that white men could pee. So let's talk about something that's happened in postmodern times. You know, I agree with part of your thesis, but I don't necessarily agree with the idea that black men going to help white women is in any way extraordinary or in and of itself an act of courage. You know, the truth of the matter is because the only thing that prevents me from being Charles Ramsey is maybe better dental. Anybody walking by and having seen that would have helped. I would have helped. You would have helped. Nipsey Russell would have helped. So colorizing his heroism, I think, is a mistake, or casting it in the same historical context as something that happened 60 odd years ago.
Jimmy,
is kind of that doesn't wash.
One more time, Jimmy Israel. Mm-hmm. Take a breath, have a pause, relax, chillax for a little bit. I want to just bring in Cole Stryker to this conversation. People are watching this and they would have seen the memes, Cole, and just say, this is just funny, it's a joke. Why so many layers to this? You're a media strategist, can you explain that for us?
Sure. Well, first of all, I just want to get out of the way that I would never try to argue that their racism is not playing a part, that there aren't people enjoying this because they are racist, that are laughing at a poor, inarticulate minority. That's definitely happening. However, I want to make the argument that there is a reason to appreciate this and find humor in it for innocent reasons. We can talk about some of the other memes out there and why they went viral that are easily compared to this, or we can talk about why specifically this went viral along with Antoine and Sweet Brown. Depends on how you want to attack it. But
why do you think it went viral? If it's not racism, Jimmy, hold your thought for a minute. We can hear you groaning, which is interesting. But Cole, carry on. Why do you think this particular meme and Antoine Dodson and Sweet Brown? Why do you think they're going viral if it's not racism? What else is it?
Well, I think in particular this story has received a lot of propulsion because it's attached to one of the biggest news stories of the decade. These three girls getting rescued. It was already a huge story, so this, by nature of association, is going to go very viral. I was tracking the Antoine Dodson story pretty closely when it came out. I was one of the first writers to write about it. And interestingly, what I found is that story, it did achieve some level of virality, but it didn't really hit big until that song came out, which was tremendously catchy and enabled people to share it with friends, and it was mind-blowing. Like that remix auto-tune was kind of a new thing at the time, and I think that just the appreciation of the artistry of that song really gave it a boost.
Jamila, I want your thoughts again on this. Behnam is tweeting, Facebooked in actually, and in agreement with what you said, Jimmy. Behnam says, turning an insightful comment about a pretty white girl running into a black man's arms into a joke completely misses the point. That simple statement actually hit on a lot of issue related to race, but I guess it's easier to just make into a joke because he said it in a funny way. So are we missing the bigger point? Did he make a bigger point about race and racism and institutionalized racism?
Right. Well, so I think, first of all, the point that Charles Ramsey made was true, right? There's so much history attached to this story, and I think even if that history has changed, so yes, it's the lived realities of black men are different than they were in the 1940s, for instance. But they're not by much. I think especially if you're in, and I've never been to Cleveland, but I'm from Oakland, and so I've seen the ways in which people in my community are vilified, and I think that there's so much history in that, right? We are used to seeing black people as performers. We have a history in this country of minstrel shows. We want to be able to laugh at something, and I think it's important to look at the fact that in each of these situations, each of these folks was coming out of a very traumatic experience, right? And so being black in America can be still pretty traumatic, I think, given the circumstances that people have to live under.
Let me just bring in Ernest Owens to the conversation. You're a Huffington Post blogger. And Ernest, I know that your friends make memes. Are you guilty in this conversation? What's going on with you and your mates?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, when I wrote my article, I just want to say that a lot of the arguments that were made about the racism, I do believe that it does have a role that does play in these memes, specifically with the fact that it is targeting African Americans. And I also feel like there's also a level of class issues that also play into this as well, noting the pattern that these are African Americans that are in different economic situations that are not, to many, relatable to the very people that are laughing and mocking them. In addition to that, I also want to add onto the conversation that there is a level of microaggressions that do take place as well. I think that a lot of people do not necessarily realize that they are being racist or that there are racist undertones in the way they act. And in my Huffington Post article, I did write about how I was experiencing, other of my white counterparts, a few of my Asian friends, people that I went to class with, that would, talk to me and mimic the sweet brown dialect or tone or use it in conversation when I was around. And even though there was never really necessarily, a warranted expression for them to do that, they chose to do so. And so I feel like a lot of these memes just reaffirm stereotypes and try to then impose them into regular society with African Americans that not necessarily are sweet brown and Antoine Dobson. So I feel like these reinforce stereotypes that other people take on into conversation.
Let me put a counter argument to you, and I'm on the Gregory Brothers page right now on YouTube, and they have a YouTube channel. If you look through their page, as I'm doing right now, here we have Mr. Charles Ramsey. Of course, you've heard his song, but there's President Obama. There's a lot of different characters here, all being meme-ified, and they're not African American. They're not all from a working class background. They're from all spectrums of society. And I also want to take you to somewhere else before Jimmy explodes with having to jump back into the conversation. I'm going to go to Cheeseburger's website, and that's just here. And anyone can make a meme. So we spoke to Ben-Hur. He's the CEO of Cheeseburger, and we asked him really about Charles Ramsey and why he thought he was being turned into a meme, and so many memes at that. Have a listen to this.
So Charles Ramsey has become a hero through imitation. People who love what he did, who think he's a hero, are going to spend time and energy creating more content about what he did. On the internet, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. And I think here, people who turn Charles Ramsey into music videos are making him immortal in some ways.
So Jimmy, there could be possibly a positive side to these memes. Charles Ramsey is hugely successful. Sweet Brown is bringing out her own barbecue sauce next month. Anton Dodson no longer lives in impoverished situations. Could there be a plus side to this that's not a negative side?
Yes and no. Firstly, I want to talk about the dude who was the dude that said that Charles Ramsey was poor and inarticulate.
Who's going to own up to that? You're in trouble. Jimmy, continue the conversation.
Yeah, I am continuing the conversation, but I mean, it's interesting that the guy that said that Charles Ramsey was poor and inarticulate, Charles Ramsey is more eloquent than he is. The guy whoever said that is inarticulate, because I couldn't understand a word he was saying between the ums and ahs. So clearly, Charles Ramsey has a little bit more media training than you. That said, that right up front.
All right, carry on.
That said, I'm just not certain if there is an upside to this memification. Just because people commodify, these individuals who have gone through hard times and make money off of them or make money for them. Does that mean that so? Are we starting a business off people's misery? Is that what that means? I mean, there's also there's a Charles Ramsey burger. There's which I had a Charles Ramsey burger. Good eating. There's a Charles Ramsey action figure. There's a Charles Ramsey T-shirt. So what does that mean? So now that we formed a cottage industry, and my wife got me an Antoine Dodson T-shirt. So what does that mean? So does that mean that he's moving on up to the big house, to the deluxe apartment in the sky? No, it doesn't.
It means that you've collected a lot of meme.
Temporarily, his misery has been given some relief until the tax man finds him.
Right. It also means you've got a lot of meme merchandise in your house.
You're right, exactly, right?
Let me bring back Malika into the conversation with the community.
Ernest, I want to add another layer. Take us someplace a little bit different. Race versus class. Have a listen to this video comment.
Hi, I am Mikey from Southgate, California. And my perspective is that these memes aren't so much about race as it is about class. And we have a lot of memes about poor people being made fun of. Not just black poor people, but we have trailer trash, we have yokels or what have you. So maybe it's not that we're making fun of black people so much as we're making fun of lower income earners, which is also kind of sad. So
So Ernest, briefly, your thoughts on that, race versus class?
Definitely, that was my push. Primarily, I think that it is a borderline. It is a more of a class issue. However, I just noticed that the trend, what is being more viral, is the videos that do feature blacks that are also a part of the lower poverty. And when I discuss class, I think that a lot of I want to push back on a statement made previously. It's not at all talking about the person's character or their likability. It's really talking about the economic bracket. I mean, Antoine Dobson's background, the projects he lived in, those are not areas that are, where vast amount of wealth is. And I think there's a trend to see that level of economic disparity in addition to race, and also putting that on the larger mocking scale. The way they dress, all of that also plays a role into how they're being memified.
So I just want to just get into the conversation, just add that you can't really divorce race and class, right? I think they both work in tandem to create white privilege in America, and I think that's really, really important to this story.
Okay, and on that note, we're just going to pause the conversation for now because we're going to have some more conversation in the post-show. And to get there, I promise you it won't be boring because we're going to be talking to Jimmy and also Cole and Eris and Ernest and Jamila. They're all coming into the post-show with us at stream.aljazeera.com. But right now, Malika has some other story leads we're following.
What happens when a feminist gains admin access to a controversial Facebook page named Brawlbusters? An online coup. 6 feminists banded together to revamp the Facebook group where male members exchange pictures of and comments on the female body. The group's description now reads, designed to bust men's myths of women's breasts, bodies, and minds. Purging the page of old content, the new admins uploaded feminist memes and quotes like these to replace the derogatory language and pictures of semi-nudity. Since new management took over, the page has lost close to 1,000 members. Next up, you can now experience Egypt's revolution vicariously through a new Facebook game, Tahrir Square Defense. Designed by an Egyptian animation studio, the game's based on the infamous camel battle, where Mubarak supporters riding camels and horses faced off with anti-Mubarak protesters. Throughout 15 levels, players have to defend the square against men on camels in the morning and Molotov cocktails in the evening. The game's creators say it represents the value of freedom versus dictatorship and will of people versus greed and authority. And staying in Egypt, our next story looks at an undercover expose of sexual harassment in Cairo. Shot by independent media group Alamek TV, actor Walid Hamad walked the streets dressed as a woman. He received aggressive catcalls and was even followed by one man. He tried the experiment with and without a headscarf and said he experienced greater harassment with it on. Well, those are the stories we're following. Let us know what's caught your eye. Use hashtag AJStream. Femi?
Thanks, Malika. Jamila, did you hear that story?
I did.
Undercover reporter?
I did.
Azamel?
And, one thing I just want to... I think we were talking earlier before the show about whether or not you can actually experience these things as a cis female
Outsider.
body. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think that patriarchy is learned. I don't think it's biological, and I think that this experiment is interesting in what it's trying to do, but at the end of the day, I think that we need to actually have conversations about what we think as a society it takes to become a man and act like a man and, be respectful of women.
And he can still take it off his high heels at the end of the day,
right?
Take off his padding, etc., and then go back to being a normal guy.
Right. So let's have actual conversations, and more than conversations, let's actually put it on the shoulders of men to act, respectful of women when they're, presenting themselves as men.
Wise words.
So daring in Egypt, nonetheless. So, of course, coming up next is the post show at stream.aljazeera.com. What are we going to be talking about next week? Now, you've heard of racism and sexism, but what about ableism? We'll discuss the impact of stereotypes with people with disabilities. We'll also hear from a man who's known online as the blind film critic. Yes, you won't want to miss how he sees film. Until then, we'll see you online. good to see you again. This is the post show for the stream at stream.aljazeera.com. But if you're watching this, you already know that. We're discussing the trend of meme-ifying African Americans after they've done local TV interviews. We're asking at what point do these memes become racist? With us to discuss this, Jamila King, a news editor at colorlines.com, Jimmy Israel, a writer and Cleveland native, Ernest Owens, Huffington Post blogger, Harris Zion Vinay, an activist and poet from Cleveland, and Cole Stryker, author and media strategist. During the conversation, Jamila, you were so composed. You were bursting to get stuff in. You can kick us off for the post show.
So one of the things I wanted to bring up was this idea that, well, not the idea, but the reality that we don't talk about poverty, right? We've been talking a lot in this conversation about the interplay of race and class. And one of the things I want to lift up is to, one of the stories that came out of the Antoine Dotson situation was that he was able to actually buy a home for his family and move them out of the projects. And so it gets to this question of, was this a good thing? And I think no, right? We actually need to talk about poverty in this country, which we don't do. There is no national conversation about poverty, about the way that race and poverty work together. And I think that that's something that we need to be talking about. Yet it's much easier to sit back and laugh at something that's funny on your computer.
But we're talking about it, so isn't this an opening? Can't a meme be an opening for talking about race and poverty and how the black and white community interact?
It can be, but I don't think that it's happened.
And Femi, it's actually interesting you asked that. Someone tweeted in, you guys are on the same wavelength. We see race is the Twitter handle. We all know race and class are an issue, but why do we not want to talk about class and race until we get a Ramsey or a Brown? And Jimmy, I know you have thoughts on this, but I actually want to hear a story from you. You told our producers ahead of the show about something we'll call maybe disaster tourism. People coming to Cleveland and taking pictures and getting back in their cars and going back to their neighborhoods. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I went to Seymour Avenue, and because I'm a reporter, I mean, I'm not just a guy that does a thing on the little box. But anyway, so I went to go check it out for myself. And what I noticed that was really telling, there were these carloads of people, white, in luxury cars, and they would pull up, and they would hop out, and they would look scared. I mean, they would be shook. They would be shook, and they would come up to Seymour Avenue. And they would take pictures of the houses. They take pictures with the houses in the background, and they pose. And they would stay maximum like 3 or 5 minutes, and they run back to the cars, and they would peel rubber out. And it was really it was distressing to see that kind of thing. I've seen that kind of thing before at happenings, but I've never seen it quite so. I don't know. It was just right out there. There's just no shame in their game. They just went and just took pictures like, hey, look at me. We're at somewhere poor where something terrible has happened. And they went back in the car and they peeled out.
Cole Stryker,
Yes.
jump back
Yes.
into the conversation for us.
Well, I want to talk about the class aspect a little bit. I think that it's actually a really compelling notion that that it's class more than or in addition to race. And I think that reality television is an interesting little thing to look at because we have Honey Boo Boo and her family, obviously, like poor, rural family, and one might think that we laugh at them because they're these poor dumb rednecks, but then we also have the Kardashians on the other side. So I think that if we try to find a common thread through these memes, and we're cherry picking 3 specific ones, I think it has more to do with the absurdism present in the video clips, the authenticity of the characters, the lack of camera readiness that is sort of refreshing to us. As people who, speaking myself personally, I'm very nervous right now because I'm worried about what people might think. And I think part of the compelling nature of Charles Ramsey's performance is that he's completely off the cuff. He's not being anybody or trying to be anybody that he's not.
Well, Cole,
I think people really gravitate towards that.
Cole, no reason to be worried. Jimmy, I'll get to you in just a second, but I want Cole to know there's no reason to be worried. There are people who think just like you. Eric on Facebook, he says, I think people genuinely find the honesty and candid humor of Charles Ramsey liberating. The media so rarely gives voice to the average working class person in the U.S. that it becomes a sensation when they actually make it through the filter. What do you think about that, the filter, and getting beside the facade of what you see on TV? Cole.
Yeah, totally. And real quick, if I could just respond to Jimmy, I personally don't think that Charles Ramsey was articulate. I'm sorry. I wasn't clear earlier.
He's more articulate than you are, bro. Clearly.
Right.
I mean, you umming and on. That brother, he wasn't performing. He was just being his genuine self. That's all he was doing. He's not exactly a performer. He's a dishwasher.
Jimmy,
Hold
on 1 minute. Otherwise, we're going to have to use the mute button.
Articulate. He's just an average black American with an average high school education. How dare you? How dare you?
I'm agreeing with you.
We're talking about opinions. Sorry, Cole, 1 second. We're talking about opinions here. Every guest has a valid opinion. Every guest his opinion is really valuable on this program, Jimmy. So just hold on 1 second and have the courtesy to allow other guests to put their opinions as well, because we're quite happy to listen to yours. So just hold on 1 second. Cole, I apologize for that. Carry on.
That's all right. I mean, my whole point is that he's not a performer, and that's why we love him. He's not trying to be some kind of sensation. It happened to him. He didn't ask for it. He's just being real, and I think that's something that people really have an emotional connection to. And just to make it 100% clear, I do not think he's articulate, or inarticulate rather. I think that that's one thing I didn't understand about the coverage, is he seemed perfectly well spoken to me. I think the absurdism of him mentioning, the word testicles and his salsa and ribs and such, within the space of also talking about this horrific kidnapping, I think that's, if anything, that's what made it go viral, not his manner of speaking.
Let me bring in Eris to the conversation while Jimmy has a meltdown, hopefully quietly. Eris, you live in Cleveland. Fingers crossed. Eris, you live in Cleveland, so you've been overhearing conversations that people are having.
Yes.
And from what I understand, they're actually quite positive conversations. Can you share one with us?
Being a Clevelander and just being around and out and about in the city, I'm constantly overhearing conversations about this story in a way where the humanity is very much attached. And that's what we kind of lose when we talk about, when we look at the memes and things of that nature. It's easy for us to detach the humanity for the sake of our entertainment. But while I was out, I was actually at a cigar shop with a couple of friends who was on his way to move to D.C., ironically. And I overheard 4 Hispanic men. One was Dominican, one was Puerto Rican, and a couple of them were mixed between a couple of different ethnicities and cultures, but they were having a real honest and tried and true conversation around the story and talked about how, Charles Ramsey did put himself in harm's way, because at the end of the day, he was approaching somebody's property. And had Castro came back home while he was trying to break into his property, anything could have happened to him. And so when I was making those references in my letter, that's what I was making reference to, that, when you step onto somebody else's property, that's still an illegal activity, even if you're doing it out of an act of heroism. So I'm really, really glad, and I'm really, really proud of my city that we're having these honest conversations and honest dialogues without even trying. And so for nothing else, it's definitely worth that, to see that.
Let me just end with the person we started with, Jamila. Does this conversation give you hope? Or does it just show you to make you want to never come ever to the stream ever again?
So I would love to be talking about the issues of violence against women, of poverty in America, and of, how race and class interact. I'd love to be talking about them when there's nothing horrific going on. Those are horrific things in general. But, at the end of the day, this is a really, really heartbreaking story about a tragedy in Cleveland. And, like the previous guest said, I think it's really, really great that a lot of candid conversations are coming on out of this. But I do think that it's important for us to try to have these conversations when there isn't a news story attached.
Her name is Jamila King. She's a reporter at Colour Lines. You've also been listening to and seeing Ernest Owings. He's a Huffington Post blogger. We also had Eris Zion-Vernay. She's an activist and poet from Cleveland. And Cole Stryker, author and media strategist. Cole, you're a brave man. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your perspective. And we have to leave you with the groaning head and the sighs and the very, very enthusiastic and energetic Jimmy Israel. Jimmy, we love you. You brought energy to the conversation. Writer and journalist, so glad that you're in Cleveland right now and we're in DC. Malika Bilal and the community. Truly, truly awesome conversation. So, on the next show, what could we possibly do after this? Well, you've heard of racism and sexism, but what about ableism? We'll discuss the impact of stereotypes against people with disabilities. We'll also hear from a man who's known online as the blind film critic. Until then, we'll see you online. You won't want to miss that program. Take care.